He called me just a housewife, then my name was announced on stage as CEO of the Year. My name is Mariana Torres. For 16 years, I was known to everyone around me as John's wife, the woman who stayed home, took care of the kids, and made sure dinner was ready by 6. That was my whole identity in their eyes. Not once did anyone ask what I wanted, what I liked, or if I was okay. People assumed I had nothing to complain about because I lived in a decent neighborhood, wore clean clothes, and smiled when expected. Hold on a moment before we move forward. Let us know where in the world you're watching from. And if you're loving these stories, don't forget to hit subscribe. Tomorrow's episode is going to be absolutely mind-blowing. I didn't complain. I stayed quiet. For years, it started to wear down slowly, not like an explosion, more like a faucet dripping somewhere behind a wall. The kind of thing you ignore at first until one day, the damage is too much to hide. John always had a way of brushing me off without raising his voice. It was subtle, passive. At social events, when people asked what I did, he'd answer for me. "She stays home. Just a housewife," he'd say, with a shrug and a smile that wasn't really a smile. Sometimes he added, "She likes it that way." I didn't correct him. Not because he was right, but because after so many years of being talked over, you start to wonder if it's worth the effort. Especially when no one seems to care either way. I cooked. I cleaned. I made the house run like a machine. When the kids got sick, I didn't sleep. When John got sick, I made soup, ironed his shirts, and handled his deadlines so he could rest. But when I was sick, he stepped over the laundry basket, told me to just rest a bit, and called takeout. The worst part wasn't what he said. It was how often he said nothing. There was one night, our 16th wedding anniversary, when things shifted. We hosted a dinner at his parents' place. Everyone from his side of the family was there. His older brother, Daniel, the financial advisor with the perfect hair. His younger sister, Grace, who never held a job longer than 6 months but still spoke like she knew everything. John's parents, of course, cold, traditional, and deeply invested in pretending their lives were more glamorous than they were. John had asked me earlier that week to take care of the food, table settings, wine, music, everything. I did. I even arranged flowers in the colors his mother liked. I cleaned their place top to bottom the morning of the dinner. All he had to do was show up, and he did. 30 minutes late, still smelling of his office cologne and pretending like he'd been busy making deals, we sat at the long dining table, fake candles flickering, soft jazz playing in the background. People laughed at John's stories. Someone made a joke about how men work and women shop. Grace chimed in with a comment about how lucky I was to stay home and not have to deal with real stress. Then Richard, John's boss, leaned across the table, glass of red wine in hand, and asked, "So Mariana, tell me, what do you do all day?" He chuckled, the kind of laugh people do when they think they're being charming. Before I opened my mouth, John answered for me. "She keeps the house standing," he said, with a smirk. "Laundry, groceries, kid pickups, you know, all the fun stuff." Everyone laughed, except me. I looked down at my plate. My stomach twisted. I heard myself let out a small laugh too, but it didn't sound like mine. I felt like I was watching someone else pretend she didn't care. Grace raised her glass. "To Mariana, the glue that keeps it all together." They toasted. I nodded. I smiled. I said nothing. But that night, I didn't sleep. John fell asleep easily, like he always did. I lay there, eyes open in the dark, staring at the ceiling. I didn't feel tired. I felt empty. Not angry. Not even sad. Just gone. The next morning, he didn't mention it. He got up, checked his email, left his coffee cup on the table like he always did, and left for work without saying goodbye. That was the moment I realized something needed to change. Not because I wanted revenge, not because I wanted to prove anything, but because I couldn't do this anymore. This routine where I was invisible, where nothing about me mattered except what I could do for him. So I started small. At night, after the kids were asleep and the dishes were done, I told them how it started with drawer inserts and late nights, how I didn't ask for permission, how no one believed in it but me. After the event, 2 students came up to me, both women. One of them said, "I called my mom right after you spoke. I think she needed to hear it more than I did. I drove home in silence that night, not thinking about growth charts or shipment delays. I thought about that first night at the dinner table, when John had laughed and said I was just a housewife. He didn't say it to be cruel. He said it because he believed it. Because for so long, that's exactly what I allowed myself to be seen as. The difference now wasn't that I had proved him wrong. It was that I didn't need to prove anything anymore. One Saturday morning, I found John in the backyard. He was cleaning the grill, something he hadn't done in years without being asked. I stepped outside, holding 2 mugs of coffee. I handed him one. He took it and said, "I've been thinking about applying for a new position, something outside the company." I was surprised. "Why?" "I don't know. I've been in the same place too long," he said. "Feels like you're moving forward, and I'm stuck." I didn't try to comfort him. I just nodded. "Then apply." He gave me a strange look. "You'd be okay with that?" "I'm not here to give you permission, John. You know that." He nodded slowly. "Right. Yeah, I guess I do." That same week, our daughter asked me if she could come with me to the office one day. I brought her on Friday afternoon. She sat next to me while I answered emails and filled out supplier forms. At one point, she looked around the warehouse and said, "You made all this?" "Yes." "By yourself?" "Yes." She didn't say anything else. But when we got back in the car, she looked out the window and said, "I want to do something like this one day." That meant more than any award I had on the shelf. By the end of the year, I had crossed $500,000 in revenue. I hired a part-time bookkeeper. I started offering customized products. I expanded into Canada. At home, we found a different rhythm. I didn't rush to serve anymore. I didn't jump to meet every need. John adjusted. Some days he did better than others. Some days he still called me busy like it was a problem. But most days, he just called me Mariana. We weren't perfect, but we weren't pretending anymore. One evening, after dinner, John handed me his phone. It was a photo, a picture of me on stage from the awards night. "Someone at work sent me this," he said. "I didn't know they took professional photos." I looked at the screen. My name was printed at the bottom. I was holding the plaque. I wasn't smiling. I looked focused, confident, tired maybe, but present. "You look like someone who belongs there," he said quietly. I handed the phone back. "I do." And for the first time, he didn't look surprised. I wasn't just a wife. I wasn't just a mother. I wasn't just anything. I was Mariana Torres. And I had built something that no one could take from me. Not even him. She smiled and walked away. In the car back to the hotel, I took my phone out and sent a photo of the award to the kids. Just them. No message. No caption. My daughter replied first. "Wow, you won?" Then my son, "So cool, Mom. Can we show this to my teacher?" I didn't check for a message from John. He hadn't called. He hadn't texted. The next morning, I packed early and took the earliest flight I could get home. I didn't want the attention. I didn't want to stay and celebrate. I wanted to go home, check on my kids, and sit in the office I built myself. When I walked through the door, it was quiet. The kids were still at school. The kitchen was clean, but I could tell it wasn't done by me. The dishes weren't where I kept them. John walked in from the backyard. He looked at me, then at the suitcase, then at the plaque in my hand. "So," he said, "you won." I set the award down on the counter. "I did." He nodded once. "Congratulations." "Thanks." He rubbed the back of his neck. I looked it up. The award. They posted the speech. I waited. "You said people told you staying home wasn't work." He continued. "I did." His mouth tightened. "Was that about me?" "Partly." He sat down at the kitchen table. "I didn't know you felt that way. You didn't ask." There was silence. He looked down at his hands. "I didn't think you needed more than what you had," he said. "I thought you were okay." "I wasn't." He nodded again. "I should have noticed," he said. "I should have seen it sooner." I didn't reply. He looked up. "What happens now?" I paused. "Nothing dramatic. I keep running my company. I keep being a mother. I keep being me." He stared at the plaque. "You're different." "No," I said. "I'm just not hiding it anymore." He didn't argue. That night, he made dinner. It wasn't perfect. The rice was undercooked, and he forgot the salad. But he tried. The kids noticed. After they went to bed, he stood at the doorway of my office. "Do you want to talk?" he asked. "Not tonight," I said. He nodded and walked away. I turned back to my desk. Orders had tripled overnight. After the award, things didn't explode. They didn't collapse either. What happened was slower, quiet. It was a shift, nothing loud. But everything changed. Orders kept growing. I hired 2 more part-time assistants and started renting a small warehouse space on the edge of town. It wasn't fancy. It had no heating in the back and one of the light fixtures flickered, but it gave me room to expand. I moved the inventory out of the house. I stopped packing boxes on the dining table. The kids started calling it Mom's office. Like it was normal, like it had always existed. My son even told his class I was the boss of something. They asked if I was on YouTube. He said no, but that I won an award that came in a box. I never showed it to them, but they found it on the bookshelf one day, and it stayed there. John noticed the changes too. He didn't talk about them much, but he started helping more. He picked the kids up from school on Wednesdays. He cooked dinner once a week, sometimes twice. Not because I asked, he just did. There were still awkward moments between us, gaps in conversation that hadn't been there before. But the weight in the room shifted. The silence wasn't angry anymore. It was uncertain. One night, while we were cleaning up after dinner, he looked at me and said, "You know, I didn't think this would last." I stopped wiping the counter. "What? Your business?" I thought it was temporary, like a phase. I didn't say anything. He continued, "But I was wrong. You built something. I see that now." I waited, not out of pride, but because I didn't want to say something to make him feel better. He had to carry that on his own. After a long pause, he asked, "Do you resent me?" I looked at him for a moment. I did. Not all the time, but enough. He nodded. "That's fair." We didn't go deeper. That was the whole conversation. But it was more than we had said in months. A few weeks later, I was invited to speak at a local university, a panel on women in entrepreneurship. I was nervous. I had never spoken in front of students before. I expected a small group, maybe 20 people. There were over 100 in the room. I wore the same black jumpsuit from the awards night, not because I didn't have other clothes, because it fit. I told my story like I always did, plainly. No drama. John stood in the doorway with his hands in his pockets and watched a car pull away. I didn't wave. The flight was smooth. The hotel room was small but clean, with a view of the city skyline. I didn't have time to rest. There was a welcome reception that evening, and then a networking brunch the next day. Everyone wore name tags. Everyone asked what you built. I told my story over and over again, and each time, it felt easier to say out loud. One woman pulled me aside during the cocktail hour and said, "I've been following your business since your first product launch. I told my sister about you. You're the reason we're doing this too." That night, I stood in front of the mirror in the hotel bathroom and just stared. I didn't feel like someone else. I felt like myself, just seen for the first time. The night of the awards ceremony, I arrived 15 minutes early and sat near the back of the room. It was a large ballroom with round tables, white tablecloths, and dim lighting that made the silver centerpieces shine more than necessary. Waiters moved between the tables with trays of water and wine. A small stage was set at the front with a podium and 2 large screens displaying the event logo, Emerging Founder of the Year. I sat with 5 other finalists. They introduced themselves casually. All of them had stories like mine, in different shapes. A bakery owner from Austin, a tech consultant from Seattle, a woman who'd opened a chain of cleaning franchises in Florida after leaving an abusive marriage. There were no rehearsed elevator pitches, just facts, struggles, work. That's all. No one asked me who my husband was. No one called me brave for leaving the house. No one said just anything. The program was long. Awards for innovation, community impact, sustainability, speeches, clapping, dinner served halfway through, dessert came cold. No one really ate it. People were checking the schedule, waiting for the final category. Then the host walked back to the podium, holding a small envelope. "And now, the moment we've all been waiting for," she said. "The Emerging Founder of the Year award recognizes not just business growth, but resilience, adaptability, and leadership in the face of difficulty. This year's finalists have shown us what it means to start from the ground and build something sustainable, something with impact." I watched her unfold the card. Her eyes scanned the name. Then she smiled. "This year's Emerging Founder of the Year is Mariana Torres, founder and CEO of Torres Home Systems." I didn't move right away. Someone at the table touched my arm. That's you. I stood up. My legs were steady. I walked to the stage without hurrying, without overthinking. I didn't look at the crowd. I focused on the steps, on the floor, on the woman handing me the plaque. When she gave it to me, she leaned in and said, "You earned this, every bit of it." I stood behind the podium. The microphone was already adjusted to my height. I had practiced a few words in my hotel room the night before, but in that moment, none of them seemed right. So I told the truth. I started my business from my kitchen table. I said I had no office, no background in retail, and no experience managing anything other than my own household. For years, I was told I wasn't doing enough, that staying home wasn't work, that if I wanted to matter, I had to prove it. So I did. I looked out at the room. Not everyone was paying attention. Some were checking their phones. Others were watching closely. That didn't bother me. My company isn't flashy. I don't sell anything new or revolutionary. I sell simple, useful things. And I built a brand around that. Around the idea that simplicity isn't failure. It's strategy. I paused. I didn't need to say more. Thank you. I walked off the stage. People clapped. A few stood. Someone in the back whistled. Cameras flashed. A photographer asked to take another photo of me holding the award. I smiled once flat. Real enough. Back at my table, someone said, "Your speech was exactly what it needed to be." Later, in the lobby, a woman followed me out. She had been sitting near the front. "Mariana," she said, "I just wanted to say that what you said up there, it hit me. I've been running my business for years and still feel like it doesn't count because no one around me takes it seriously. But hearing you say it out loud, it helps." I nodded. It counts. Others took pictures. A woman from Chicago asked if I'd be open to a distribution partnership. A buyer from a subscription box company wanted samples. I gave out every business card I brought by noon. At one point, a man in a suit stood across from my table and looked at the shelf of drawer inserts I'd designed. "This yours?" he asked. "Yes." He nodded slowly. "This is clean. Practical. Looks like you've been doing this a while." "I started last year," I said. He looked up. "You built all this in a year?" I nodded. He picked up one of the product tags and read it. "I know people who've spent 5 years trying to get to this level," he said. "Nice work." It wasn't flattery. It was direct, casual, matter of fact. But it meant more than any compliment I'd ever gotten at home. By the end of the second day, I was invited to join a panel called From Scratch to Scale. It was a last-minute change. Someone had dropped out, and the organizer said she'd seen my booth and liked how clear my branding was. I said yes before she finished asking. That panel changed everything. There were 4 of us. 2 women who had tech startups, 1 man who ran a logistics firm, and me, the product-based business owner. The moderator asked how we got started. The others spoke about incubators and pitch decks. When it was my turn, I said, "I started from my kitchen table. I had no funding, no team, just a laptop, a few product samples, and a lot of time between school pickups." People laughed lightly, not mockingly. They listened. I explained how I reinvested every dollar, how I learned to read analytics from scratch, how I handled logistics and fulfillment myself until I couldn't anymore. The woman next to me, who had a master's in finance, asked me how I kept my cost per acquisition so low. I told her I built my customer base by understanding what people needed in real homes, not showrooms. At the end of the panel, a woman approached me and handed me her card. "We're nominating businesses for the Emerging Founder Award next quarter," she said. "You should apply." I didn't tell John about that. When I got home Sunday night, the house was quiet. The kids were asleep. Dishes were stacked in the sink. The living room looked like it hadn't been vacuumed once while I was gone. John was sitting on the couch, staring at the TV. "How was the trip?" he asked without looking up. "Productive," I said. He turned off the TV. "The kids missed you." "It was a lot." I didn't say anything. He wasn't wrong. Parenting alone for 3 days is hard, but I'd done it thousands of times. He finally looked at me. "So, this is serious then?" I put down my bag and took off my coat. "Yes, it is." He rubbed his hands over his face. "And what? You're going to be traveling more now? Going to expos? Running a team?" I sat across from him. "I already am." He didn't answer right away. He just looked tired, not angry, not impressed, just stuck. After a long pause, he said, I guess I just didn't realize you were doing all this behind my back. That got to me more than I expected. I wasn't doing it behind your back, I said quietly. I was doing it without your help. The next day, I went back to my usual schedule. School drop-off, emails, inventory checks. Except now I had a call with a regional wholesaler at 10, a meeting with a freelance marketing consultant at 2, and I was onboarding a part-time assistant by 5. My company was real, and it was growing. John didn't ask about it. He started working later, eating dinner separately, watching TV in the guest room some nights. I think part of him didn't know how to fit into this new version of our life, and I was too focused to explain it to him. A few weeks later, I got the official email. I'd been nominated for the Emerging Founder of the Year award. The ceremony would be in Los Angeles in 3 months. I read the message twice. Then again, I closed the laptop slowly and just sat there. 16 years of being just a housewife. Now, someone out there was writing my name on an award application, not because I was anyone's wife, but because I had built something that mattered. I didn't tell anyone about the nomination at first. The email sat in my inbox for 2 days before I even responded, not because I wasn't proud I was, but because I didn't know how to say it out loud without it sounding like I was bragging. I was so used to shrinking my wins, minimizing what I had built, that even recognition made me hesitate. I finally replied, confirmed my attendance, and submitted the required information for the press kit. I typed Mariana Torres, founder and CEO, Torres Home Systems, and attached a headshot I had taken in my office with a neutral background. No professional styling, no makeup artist, just me. When the official nominee list was published online, I stared at the page for a long time. There were tech startup founders, a woman who had invented a patented medical device, and a man who ran a company that provided clean water filtration systems to rural towns. And me, a woman who started with drawer organizers and built a 6-figure business from the same kitchen table where her kids did their homework. I printed the article and pinned it on the corkboard in my office. That same evening, John walked past my office, paused, and stepped inside. He looked at the board. "What's this?" "A nomination," I said. "For what?" "An industry award." He squinted at the printout, reading my name out loud. "CEO of the Year," he asked, raising an eyebrow. "That's real?" "Yes," I said. "It is." He leaned on the doorframe, arms crossed. I mean, congratulations." "Thanks." He didn't say anything else, just stood there for a few seconds, then walked away. That night, at dinner, he barely spoke. The kids talked about school, about a project on marine life, and who got in trouble at recess. John nodded along but didn't engage. When the dishes were done, he disappeared into the garage and stayed there for over an hour. I sat on the couch and read over my itinerary for the awards weekend. It would be in Los Angeles. 2 days of networking events, a panel, and the ceremony itself on the final night. They offered to pay for travel and accommodation. I'd be staying at a downtown hotel, all expenses covered. I wouldn't need to spend a dime. Still, when I booked the flight, I felt a strange tension in my chest. Not guilt, not fear, something else. Something that told me I had finally stepped into a space I wasn't going to shrink out of. 2 weeks later, I received the physical invitation in the mail, a heavy black envelope with silver text. Inside was a formal letter welcoming me to the finalist circle and outlining what to expect at the event. There was also a card with a note handwritten in blue ink. "Your story is exactly why this award matters. We're excited to share it." I kept the card, put it in the drawer next to my passport. The next day, I was in the kitchen making coffee when John walked in and opened the fridge. "So when is this thing?" he asked. "End of the month. I'll be gone for 3 days. He nodded but didn't look at me. "You want me to come with you?" I hesitated. "Do you want to?" He shrugged. "It's your thing." "I think I'd rather go alone," I said, and the word surprised both of us. He blinked. "All right then." It wasn't a fight. It wasn't even tension. It was something colder, distance we both acknowledged without saying it out loud. In the days that followed, I started preparing. I bought a new dress. Nothing flashy. A black jumpsuit, clean lines, comfortable. I had it tailored. I ordered new business cards with a metallic finish. I updated the website. I ran a small giveaway to celebrate the nomination. Orders doubled that week. Every time I heard the notification chime on my phone, I felt something shift inside me, a kind of quiet confidence I hadn't felt in years. I was still making dinner every night, still helping with homework, still folding laundry, but I wasn't invisible anymore, at least not to myself. The day before I left for Los Angeles, John came home early. He found me in the office, going over final details. "You packed already?" he asked, almost. He nodded. "The kids are excited you're going. They told their teachers." I smiled. "That's nice." He sat down on the edge of the couch across from my desk. "So what happens if you win?" "I give a short speech, thank people, take a photo, go back to work the next day." He looked at the floor. "Do you think you'll win?" I looked at him. I already did. He didn't answer, just stood up and left the room. That night, he didn't sleep in the guest room. He didn't say anything, but he stayed in bed next to me, awake. The next morning, I kissed the kids goodbye and got into the rideshare that took me to the airport. "Are you watching a new series or something?" I looked up from the kitchen sink and said, "Yeah, something like that." He didn't ask anything else. That night, I sat on the floor of our bedroom with my laptop and calculated my revenue from the past 6 months. I had cleared $19,300. Not bad for a business that didn't exist a year ago. I still remember how I stared at that number on the screen. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just sat there, taking it in. It wasn't about the money. It was the fact that I did it on my own. No help, no handouts, no one cheering me on. The only thing that pushed me forward was the quiet voice in my head that said, "Keep going." Then came the moment that changed everything. I was in the carpool line waiting for the kids when I got an email from a wholesaler. They wanted to stock my products in their boutique chain. They had 8 stores across the state. I thought it was spam at first, but when I looked them up, they were real and serious. I didn't tell John. Instead, I went home, pulled up every contract template I could find, and spent the next 2 days putting together a wholesale agreement. I didn't sleep much that week. I was running on anxiety and caffeine. But when the deal was signed, I knew I had crossed a line I couldn't go back from. This was no longer a side project. I was a business owner. I started to treat it that way. I woke up earlier. I built a small home office in the unused guest room and moved everything in there. John barely noticed. He walked past the open door every day and never asked what I was doing. I think part of him didn't want to know, because knowing would mean acknowledging that maybe, just maybe, I had ambitions he never saw coming. I opened a second business account, got approved for a small business credit card, and hired someone to help with fulfillment. Orders were growing too fast for me to handle alone. I also started researching business expos and online conferences. I applied for one under my business name using the company branding, the LLC, and my role as founder and CEO. It felt strange to write it at first, but I had earned it. 2 weeks later, I got accepted. The conference was in Denver. John would need to watch the kids for 3 days. When I told him, he blinked. "You're going to Denver? For what?" "Business," I said. He laughed, not in a cruel way, but like I'd just told him I was going to space. "Since when do you have a business?" I looked at him calmly. "Since last year." There was a long pause. "Wait, you're serious?" "I am." He looked confused. "What kind of business?" "E-commerce. I sell home organization products online. I'm in over 30 retail locations now." He stared at me like I was making it up. "Is this why you've been so busy?" "Yes." Another pause. "You never said anything. You never asked." He didn't respond, and in that moment, I realized the gap between us wasn't new. It had always been there. The only difference now was that I had stopped trying to close it. The flight to Denver was the first time I had traveled alone in nearly 20 years. The last time was before the kids, before the mortgage, before every decision had to go through John. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't excited either. I was focused. I had prepared every minute of my trip with the same care I once used to plan John's business dinners. Now it was just for me. John didn't say much when I left. He stood in the doorway with a coffee in his hand and a blank look on his face. "Let me know if your flight gets delayed," he said. I nodded. "The itinerary's on the fridge. The kids' schedules are too." He nodded, then stepped aside so I could pass. No hug, no good luck, just silence. At the airport, I watched other women moving through the terminal in clean blazers, rolling laptops behind them, speaking in clipped, direct tones. For years, I used to think they were different from me, that they had something I didn't, maybe confidence, maybe luck. But sitting there with my business card in my purse, wearing the badge that said exhibitor, I realized I wasn't looking at strangers anymore. I was one of them. The first day of the conference, I arrived early and set up my table. My booth was simple. Wide backdrop, organized product displays, a banner with my logo and company name Torres Home Systems printed in dark gray. Under it, small but clear, founder, Mariana Torres. People stopped. Some asked questions. I'd go online. I didn't even know what I was looking for at first. I just knew I needed something that was mine. Something that didn't involve folding socks or packing lunches. I took a free marketing class. Then another. Then I watched a 10-part video series on e-commerce, followed by a 3-hour workshop about drop shipping. It was messy, confusing. Half the time I didn't know what I was doing, but I kept going. I bookmarked articles. I watched tutorials. I took notes in a notebook I hid in the kitchen drawer under the dish towels. John never noticed. He thought I was just browsing Pinterest. 3 months in, I bought a domain. It was a small thing, cost less than a dinner out, but it felt like claiming a piece of land, a place that belonged to me. I used part of the grocery budget to order samples of handmade organizers from a supplier overseas. I spent hours figuring out Shopify, logo design, product descriptions, SEO. Every mistake felt like a punch, but every small success, even something as minor as someone signing up for my email list, felt huge. And no one knew. I didn't tell my friends. I didn't tell the kids. I didn't tell John. Not because I was hiding it out of shame, but because I wanted to build it before anyone had the chance to laugh, because I knew they would. I knew if I said something too soon, John would roll his eyes, Grace would say I was playing entrepreneur, and his mother would ask how it affected my housework. So I stayed quiet, and for the first time in years, being quiet didn't feel like defeat. It felt like power. I didn't know exactly when it stopped feeling like a project and started feeling like a real business. It just happened gradually, the way a slow leak turns into a flood when no one's watching. One day I was testing different fonts for a logo, and the next I was tracking inventory, replying to customers, and figuring out how to manage a refund policy. I ran everything from my laptop at the kitchen table. During the day, I had a system. I'd pack orders after lunch, update product listings while the laundry spun in the background, and respond to customer questions between school pickups and dinner prep. I worked while John was at the office and the kids were in school, which meant I had about 6 hours a day to make it work. And no one knew. I didn't tell my sister, who would have laughed and asked why I was bothering with side hobbies. I didn't tell my mother, who would have just asked if it distracted me from cooking. And I didn't tell John, because the last time I mentioned starting anything of my own years ago, he'd said I should just relax and enjoy not having a job. So instead, I built it alone. It wasn't glamorous. I made mistakes. I over-ordered on a product that no one wanted and lost almost $300. I forgot to renew a domain once and had to scramble to get it back before someone else bought it. I stayed up until 3 in the morning once trying to fix a shipping error that almost sent 15 orders to the wrong address. But with every mistake, I learned something. I opened a separate bank account. I registered the business in my name. I used a variation of my maiden name to keep it from being searchable. It wasn't about secrecy. It was about control. For once, I wanted something that belonged only to me. Sales were slow at first. I remember the first month I made more than I spent. It was only $74 in profit, but it felt like I'd won a lottery. Then came a month where I made $212, then $485, then over $100. That's when I started to believe this might actually work. I reinvested everything. I didn't take a cent for myself. I ordered new packaging, bought a better camera to take product photos, and hired a virtual assistant overseas to help me handle customer emails. I never imagined I'd be delegating anything, but I was spending 3 hours a day just answering messages, and I needed help. Meanwhile, John still thought I was spending too much time on the computer. He never asked why. At dinner, He complained about traffic, about the new hire at work who didn't know how to use a spreadsheet, about the barista who always got his coffee order wrong. I nodded in the right places. I asked follow-up questions when needed, but my mind was usually somewhere else. On the inventory sheet I needed to update, or the email campaign I had scheduled for the next day. At one point, he said, "You've been on your laptop a lot lately."